Okay, so I'm a little sick and tired of gamers and games journalists thinking that hard games begin and end with the Souls series. The Souls games challenge you more than most games, but they're not as unforgiving as a lot of gamers and games journalists make them out to be. I could leave the video off right here by saying that once you understand the mechanics, the games become significantly easier, but that's too easy. Instead, I'm gonna list 5 reasons why Dark Souls isn't that hard. I'm mostly going to be talking about the first game since that's the game that's considered the most classic, and it's also where the series first got the reputation for being an anus penetrator. Alright, let's not waste any more time. These are my 5 reasons why Dark Souls isn't that hard. It always amuses me watching newbies first play through this game because they always approach it like it's a Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, I'm gonna master the combos and kick the asses of everybody around me style of game. And as a result, they always get their shit pushed in.
Dad, Your Honor, I touched this nigga's penis pouch. He's supposed
It's kinda ironic because you would think having no combos to learn would lead to players picking this game up easier. There's really not that much to the combat of Dark Souls. If you're playing a melee character with a sword and shield, your offensive moves are a quick attack, a strong attack, a jump attack, a step back attack, and a roll attack. That's only 5 attacks, all of which are assigned between 2 buttons. And you don't even have to worry about chaining any of these attacks together, unlike some of the games I've mentioned earlier. When it comes to your defensive options, you have 3, blocking, rolling, and parrying. You simply press the left bumper button to block, and most enemies can be blocked. And when it comes to the rolling, that's the strategy for most of the bosses in the game. You see that it's about to attack, you dodge! Parrying is the only mechanic in the game that requires some bit of mastery, and even then it's just pressing the left trigger button the exact time an enemy hits your character. If you're playing a ranged character, then most of what I said before doesn't even apply. You simply sit back and pick enemies off by spamming magic or arrows. When it comes to the beefier enemies, the same tactic still applies, except you won't kill them immediately. So when they get close to you, you just... There's a reason why people in the Souls community refer to the magic builds as the easy mode. I'm talking about both the items you have and the environment you can use to your advantage. Despite how limited your character's moveset is, it's not like you don't have plenty of other ways to get past enemies and obstacles. Even early game, the Asylum Demon is pretty big and scary for a tutorial boss, but he really isn't shit since you could take out a third of his health by dropping down on him in the beginning of the fight. Same thing with the Taurus Demon, a boss that's notorious for being a roadblock for new players, can be cheesed by just climbing the ladder and jumping on him a couple times. Not only that, when you first arrive in Lordran, there's a corpse nearby with some fire bombs that you can use to do considerable damage to the guy. Anybody that chose the Pyromancer will have an even easier time as they'll have both fireballs and fire bombs they can use to torch him with. Magic builds can lay back in a hammock with a coconut drink in hand as all they gotta do is just spam soul arrows. Going back to the melee builds for a second, if you somehow suck at both jumping and throwing stuff, going toe to toe with this boss isn't too bad either, as in the stage beforehand, you could get gold pine resin by first buying the resident key off this guy and unlocking this door. Or if you're a cheap bastard like me, you could just straight up murder him for it, and you can also get the Uchikatana for free. The gold pine resin electrifies your weapon for a short duration, causing you to do double the damage, which makes this boss and even later bosses a breeze. But buffing your weapon is not even necessary, which brings me to my third point. Okay, so this is probably the most subjective point on this list, but I honestly believe that the vast majority of enemy attacks are easily avoidable. The AI is actually really predictable, at least when it comes to the humanoid enemies. A lot of their attacks have a noticeable windup that you can prepare for. The best part about this is that almost every horizontal swing can be parried, and when you attack after parrying, you do a critical hit attack that does considerable damage. The final boss, Gwyn, is one of the hardest bosses in the game if you fight him straight up, but once you got the parrying down, he becomes one of the easiest. But going back to the regular enemies, if you suck at parrying, you can easily circle around enemies and just backstab them for a good amount of damage. These Black Knight guys that are notorious for shitting on new players are actually not that bad once you realize you can abuse this. These guys are also placed throughout the game pretty sparingly, which leads me to my fourth point. If the developers really wanted to be dickheads, they could have done what they did in Dark Souls 2 and constantly having you fight 3 or more enemies at the same time. It happens a good chunk in this game, but when it does, the enemies are usually weak as hell. The stronger enemies like the Black Knights and the Stone Demons are optional and are usually placed in a room off the beaten path. A lot of the mini bosses like the Hydra and Havel the Rock can be ignored entirely. Okay, maybe not the Hydra, you need to kill it for the DLC section, which is also optional, but come on. During the latter parts of the game, former bosses are reintroduced as normal enemies to get by, but by this point, you should no longer be a frail piece of shit, and the game gives you plenty of space to deal with them. If you absolutely cannot get past an area or a boss, you can always do some spend 1 humanity to become alive, and you can summon up to 2 more guys to help you lay the whoop ass. Although boss health bars scale with more people you summon, the moveset of the bosses weren't designed around fighting more than 1 person, meaning that 1 guy can be a distraction while everyone else lays the beat down. You can imagine this makes the bosses kinda trivial, which is why a lot of people in the community say that it's not how the game is meant to be played, but
shit, boy.
If it's in the game and you're having a hard time, might as well use it. Even if you don't have internet, you still have the option of summoning NPCs to help you out for most of the bosses. They're not as helpful as real people, but they still provide a good punching bag for bosses while you're killing them on the down low. So in conclusion, Dark Souls isn't that hard, at least not as hard as a lot of people make it out to be. Now this isn't to say that Dark Souls is completely fair and not hard at all, that's not what I'm saying. There are plenty of moments of surprise anal rape that even catches veteran players off guard. I'm just making the case that that's not the entire package, or even most of the package. Most of these points can also be applied to the sequels, which are arguably easier. I don't know, maybe I just don't feel the overwhelming difficulty anymore since I beat all of the games multiple times. Anyway, that's all I gotta say about this. Pretty interested in hearing other people's thoughts on this though.